introduce you all to Bill Tobin, the Rotary Relations Manager for ShelterBox USA. So I first heard about ShelterBox at La Pets. So I have an intro to it. So I'm excited for all of you to get to know about it. A little bit about Bill. He's the member of the Rotary Club of El Dorado Hills, California, and he's been a member since 2004. And Bill has served a variety of club and district leadership roles and has been a major donor to the Rotary Foundation. And in, 2016, Rotary District 5180 awarded Bill Rotarian of the Year. Oh. For his active and dedicated service to Rotary and for his commitment to ShelterBox. Bill began as a volunteer for ShelterBox after the 2010 earthquake in Haiti. Since then, Bill has shared the ShelterBox story to thousands of Rotarians, organized fundraisers and awareness events for ShelterBox USA, and helped lead the team of USA ambassadors in raising over $1.4 million for ShelterBox in 2017. For his volunteer efforts with ShelterBox USA, Bill has received the United States Presidential Volunteer Service Award 7 times. Wow. After a 30-year career as a nuclear power plant inspector, Bill earned a certification in nonprofit management from the University of the Pacific and joined the staff at ShelterBox USA as Rotary Relations Manager in January 2019. Bill is married to Sherry and has been for 37 years, who is an assistant in the governor in District 5180. And they have 2 sons and a daughter-in-law. Everyone, please welcome Bill Tobin.
Yay.
I don't want to get too long.
Thank you, Brandy. Yeah, my wife is an assistant governor right now. And if you notice my background change, probably means that she jumped on a Zoom call for Rotary business and we share an account. So my background always changes when that happens. I don't know why. And full disclosure, she was our district's Rotarian of the year before I was. So that is, I don't know if that's been done before. Maybe Brad, maybe Brad knows if there's.
I think it was they just didn't want to have to move the trophy, right?
they put Tobin in there twice, I think, and then they had to put a different first name or something. But anyways, thanks so much for having me here tonight. What a great club. I love small clubs. You know, you kind of lose a lot of that community when you have a club of 200 or 300 people around you. And the club I'm in is 43, and when I took over as membership chair, we were at 24, and I grew it up into the high 30s. And then the last couple of years, we continue to add some folks, and our retention's real high. And one of the reasons I think our club has such good success is we really personify Holger's theme. Rotary offers opportunities and opens opportunities, and we really let our members do what they want to do better in the world. So Ashley Bryant, who's one of the founders of 3 Strands Global, a big anti-trafficking organization here in Northern California, she's in our club, and that's her focus. And it's kind of like having a lot of little mini cause-based clubs in some ways. And it's something that my wife and I just cherish doing. Rotary is really our lifestyle. I know you've got Brad in your club that's probably real similar, and he and his family just live and breathe Rotary, and it's a wonderful example. So enough about me. I could go on all night talking about myself, but that's not what I'm here for. Hopefully, Brandy, if you give me a thumbs up if you see my screen, great, fantastic. This is all about ShelterBox. ShelterBox is 20 years old this year, and we were started by a Rotary club. And that's really something that is astonishing, that the things a Rotary club can accomplish. It was the idea of the Helston Lizard Club in the UK. They wanted to help 10 families a year. That was the concept, just 10 families a year. Your club could handle that, my club could handle that, but what they wanted to do really had purpose in the world. They did an assessment. They had a couple of people who had some expertise in disaster relief and survival, logistics in those situations, and they found a need, a gap that they could fill. And so the Helston Lizard Club started ShelterBox. And like all good Rotary Club ideas, other clubs wanted to participate in it. So it grew and it grew and it grew to such a point that in 2012, with thousands of clubs supporting us each year around the world, Rotary International said, hey, we need to make this a formal partnership, because it was just a club's project and still is today. It's operated and funded independently of Rotary International and the Rotary Foundation. It was started by a Rotary Club, and it's just, there's really nothing like it in Rotary that I've seen. It's not in the same concept in its origins as, say, our Polio Plus program, which is managed and funded through Rotary. This, if I could compare it to anything, would be Easter Seals, which started originally as a Rotary Club's program in Ohio, and grew and grew and grew, and had its own legs the whole way, its own financing and all that. So we're kind of along those same lines. Now, what we do is provide shelter after a family is displaced either by a natural disaster or conflict. We have a lot of things that we could hand families. We hand deliver our aid, mosquito nets, ground covers, water purification systems, blankets, and of course, tents. And we have several different styles of tents. Some of them are designed very specifically for harsh weather conditions, like the Flex 3 tent. You see there, that is a wood burning stove, albeit a very small one, but certainly big enough to keep that tent comfortable in harsh climates. We've also started doing tarpaulin-based solutions for shelter, whether it's a complete rebuild using shelter as your exterior materials, or a way of repairing a home that has significant damage, like a roof blowing off or walls crumbling away. When folks get the shelter kit, they get full-size tools. And we've seen, specifically in areas where people depend on farming to make a living, to feed their families, the importance of things like trenching tools and full-size shovels. When we do shelter kits, we also have a smaller green box that's will contain those other items, household items like the cook sets and the blankets and so forth and so on, so that families still get all the gear that they need to repair or replace their homes. We've worked in the Philippines more than any other country. I think we're probably right at or around, because we're doing stuff there right now. We're probably over actually 30 different deployments in our 20 years to the folks in the Philippines. And a lot of times when we deploy there, that's going to be quite some time for them to get the natural materials that they prefer to use for some of their roofing. So the tarps make a huge difference there, where they really could rebuild their house completely, sans those various materials that they'll use for their roofs once those materials become available. Now, it's important to realize that where we operate in the world, there really, in the folks we reach, there's no such thing as home insurance or house insurance or flood insurance or any sort of safety nets that we have here in the United States. So we really are the means of a house or a home for someone until they can rebuild. In our areas of conflict, like in Syria, we're the only presence of Rotary. There is no Rotary Club in Syria. So what these families receive from us is a gift that is not coming from any other sources. And we've had a long response now in Syria. I'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. Our first major deployment was in 2005, early 2005, after the Boxing Day tsunami, which struck Southeast Asia. And we helped over 22,000 families across 4 different countries. And it really sets ShelterBox on a whole different plateau from being just a little clubs project that we were helping hundreds of families here, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 families there. But to help this number of families really set us on a stage, not only within Rotary, but it really branched out beyond Rotary. We were invited to participate in the UN Shelter Cluster, for example, which does an incredible amount of work around the world. I first learned about ShelterBox after Haiti, and I was actually our club's Interact advisor at the time and president-elect of our club. And it was the interactors who said, Mr. Tobin, you guys could all call me Bill, but they always call me Mr. Tobin. What should we do for these families in Haiti? I would always point out, I never had a good answer for those kids. They outsmart me every time, but I'd always point them to Rotary and whatever they were trying to solve. So in this case, it was Rotary and disaster relief. Well, a couple hours later, they, I think, texted me at the time, which I probably didn't even really do very well, and they told me about ShelterBox. It totally blew me away that within days we were working in country in Haiti. In response to that disaster, we helped over 33,000 families, 28,000 initially, and then found pockets in up to 2 years after the fact, where we were in areas responding to hurricanes and learned that people hadn't had a home since the earthquake. Really ongoing work there. It was much more than just there and gone, like a lot of people think natural disaster relief work operates. So our longest response to date has been in response to the Syrian crisis. The crisis started in the spring of 2012, and since then, ShelterBox has been working in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Iraq, in Turkey, in Syria, in Greece, all helping families that have been displaced due to that conflict. It's our longest ongoing response to a disaster or conflict. Conflict, in my opinion, is a man-made disaster. It displaces millions of people, it kills millions of people. That's a disaster by any definition. But now we've helped over 60,000 families. And it is really this work in Syria that was spotlighted by the Nobel Peace Prize Commission when we were nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize in 2018 and again in 2019. I'll talk a little bit more about Syria shortly. Now we do deploy in the United States, but I just want to put it in Rotary terms. The United States has close to 7,500 Rotary clubs and about 300,000 Rotarians. That's a huge force of people that could come and help at a moment's notice. We operate in countries like Burkina Faso. There's less than 200 Rotarians in the entire country. They have the fastest growing displacement due to conflict on earth. We operate in Ethiopia, less than 500 Rotarians for over 105 million people. These are things that, areas that have absolutely no safety nets comparative to the United States. But that doesn't mean we exclude the US. After Hurricane Harvey, we found a real interesting niche. We did shelter within a shelter, which gave families that needed a little extra privacy, 8-month pregnant woman and her husband and child were in one. This is an autistic child in this picture who really just wasn't working good in groups, which is easy to imagine. So we did this in several locations around Houston after Hurricane Harvey. So the little club project that could, they wanted to help 10 families. They told another club about it. Next thing you know, 20 years go by and close to now 350 responses. We're real close to that number, and over 1.6 million people provided with shelter. But that is really just a drop in the bucket to what is needed. These figures we are not keeping up with. These figures are outpacing the ability for the world response, not just ShelterBox, but the entire world's response to help. Conflict at almost 80 million people is a total displacement greater than World War I and World War II combined for people displaced that's going on in the world right now. So I want to talk a little bit about this partnership because it's really a fascinating aspect of this relationship. Obviously volunteers, they're the heart of what we do. I was a volunteer until I literally changed careers, completely opposite focus in my career and joined the staff at ShelterBox. You may notice Matoni in this picture and Jim Carrier is in the picture, maybe a few familiar faces from the Bay Area, but we could certainly use more and more volunteers. If we could double our volunteer base, it'd be outstanding to do that. Reach would really be impressive. One thing we're doing, and I want to invite you all to it, it's Thursday night, so Brad's probably busy at the Zone Institute, but then again, maybe not. 5 to 6 p.m., it's happy hour, and we have a real special hour planned. You're going to learn a lot of the background behind the people that we help and some of the people that have made it happen over the years. It's free to register, and if you don't see the link there and can't remember, virtual after our website, Brandy, I'll send you some links when we're done. So, but beyond fundraising and events and volunteers and speaking to clubs and all, seeing the tent at Pets and all that kind of stuff, Rotarians around the world have been instrumental in growing the organization. We used to do everything right out of the UK, and we knew real early on, that wasn't the best solution, but we really couldn't solve the problem of getting somewhere less expensively and faster, more efficiently, storing gear close to where it's needed. And now we have several pre-positioned hubs around the world that have been a result of Rotarian influences and connections and beyond Rotary as well. When a disaster happens, again, it is really a dynamics of where it's happening and if there are Rotarians in the area. We responded real recently in Vanuatu, an island nation in the South Pacific. They have 43 Rotarians and for the whole country between two clubs. So it's, when possible, we partner with Rotary, and there's always that communication going on, even if it's, sorry, we don't have any help in that area of the country, and we don't know anybody. And other times it's connecting us with transportation, importation, lodging our folks when they're on the ground, helping us with assessment work, helping us with the deployment of handing out the gear itself. The Philippines, again, is a great example of this partnership, and it really brings a whole different concept to disaster relief. It's not a foreign aid group coming in and kind of taking things over, and here, take a number, we'll get with you, fill out this form. We're just facilitating a local Rotary club to really do that work, and it's been amazing. The Philippines is certainly our biggest success stories. We've seen Rotary clubs grow because these same families you see maybe getting aid here from last year are now saying, how do I be a part of that? So it's really a fascinating partnership in all sorts of different aspects. So right now, we're about as busy as we possibly can be. This is a good illustration, and Brandy, I sent you a PDF of all these earlier, so you can share them with the folks that are on the call as well. Or if you can't, if you're looking on a phone or something, maybe you can look at these a little bit later and read it better. But it shows you a couple things. One, the different colors, it means totally different parts of a relief effort. It's not just get the boxes, let's go. There's a lot more involved in that. And you'll also notice on this where we are in the world. We're working in some very remote and some would say very dangerous areas, and they wouldn't be lying one bit. But we can't stop. The COVID virus going around is just another layer of disasters, the way we look at things. And we're not alone with that look. This is John Hugo, and I know everyone, if Brad's in this club, everybody knows who John Hugo is, I guarantee you. And if you don't, look him up. He's a fascinating man. I've had a wonderful opportunity to have lunch with him a couple times, and so down to earth. Don't ever feel intimidated by Rotarians. We're people. I went up and asked Rick King to speak at my club when I was president, and he said, sure, and he came and he did it. And people ask me, how did you ever get the nerve to do that? And I'm just like, it's Rick King. Well, how could you not go talk to him? So Brad, you're going to speak to our club soon virtually. Okay, I'm just throwing that one out there for you. But John Hugo says we're playing this real vital role in this global response to COVID-19. And, it begs the question, why would someone displaced by hurricane or fire, earthquake, or war be at any more risk than you or I? And it really boils down to population density. Whether you're in a refugee camp, by and large, or an evacuation center, people are crammed much closer together. The Kutupalong refugee camp are Rohingyan refugees in Bangladesh. We've done work there several times. This is a picture from the camp. You'll notice two things. One, the importance of tarps. It's their primary roofing material in camps like this. Second, you'll notice there's really no roads, there's no plumbing, and there's no hospitals, and there's very few, if any, doctors, no testing facilities, no way of testing people. These are very high, steep curves that are hitting areas like this. And like this, how about a U.S. evacuation center? And this is a picture of one right here. This is after or during a hurricane and flood. Coronavirus go wall to wall in here in a heartbeat. So these are situations that we could play a part in getting families separated. And if you think about it, it's exactly what we're doing on this call here tonight. Brandy, you've got that tent there on the left. Brad, yours is over there on the right. Jolene, you've got a tent here. Of course, our tents in reality are pretty nice. I have a nice house. I hope you've got nice dwellings as well. But it's a way we can separate. And so in these areas of conflict where people are forced to live close together, or after a disaster strikes, that it's so important that we get those folks separated. Some examples from the Philippines, 5 responses there since mid-March. This is a hospital on the island of Cebu. The Eversley Hospital was overrun. Earlier this year, I know numbers are going back up, so I would not doubt that something like this will occur again in this area. We were able to put up some temporary buildings for them, very similar to what we saw in New York City. So now they could accommodate 100 more patients per day, taking care of those broken legs and broken arms and those types of things. People who are showing temperatures and all the signs. The rest of their hospital is a big COVID ward at this point. This is the Rotary Club of Batangas, Midwest. I know there's more than one in Batangas, along with some ShelterBox response team members after a tall TAAL volcano erupted. Again, you had evacuation center settings. We've really changed the way we do things. Normally, this would be like going into a Cal Berkeley game. Be a long line of families. Everyone's got their ticket. You wouldn't know where one starts and one stops. But like everything else now, separating people. A big adaptation of what we're doing is in our training. We take great pride in training people on everything that they receive. Even if it's a solar light, we want people to know what its function is, how long it'll take to recharge. There's different settings, so you might not always need the bright setting. Even simple things like that, we want to make sure families understand, because they're already under an enormous amount of stress. They've just lost their home, or war has chased them out of their city. And now we can't do group training. And we know in Rotary how great group training is. We bounce things off each other, best practices, whatnot. And we aren't able to do that around the world right now. So it's real difficult on families, much more difficult than it normally is. But it's not stopping us. We're still working globally. We've helped now, and this is from August. I haven't seen the new numbers yet, but I'm sure we're over 100,000 people now this year. The Lake Chad Basin area that people just don't hear about in the news. It's a huge, huge humanitarian crisis there. You've got Boko Haram violence, which has displaced millions in Nigeria and Niger and Chad and Cameroon. You also have an ecological disaster. Climate change is what I'm calling it. I'm not going to get into the debate, but pictures don't lie, or they tend not to lie. And this is a satellite picture I grabbed off the internet, one of the few I did from '73, and this from Google Maps. This is Lake Chad today, or as recent as Google Maps has in their stuff. You could see a total change in the landscape. The green areas still get wet. In fact, they flood quite a bit in the wet seasons. So families will have to move close, then they get flooded out. It's a very common situation. You can see where something like Boko Haram figures if they control the water, they can control the people, and they've unfortunately been very successful in this region. So Minawao is a camp where we are the only supplier of tents to new arrivals. There's close to 70,000 people there. District 7210 has a global grant. They're putting together a long-term project here. If you're interested, Brad, or want to put us in one, or put Louis Turpin, past district governor there, in any project fairs, he'd love to share this information. It's such a big camp, you can see it from space, again, from Google Maps. The only thing I altered on this was I put the little round circle, and that represents 50 tents or 50 homes. Pre-COVID-19, this is what it would look like on any given training day. It's almost all females. It's 80 to 85% female population in Minawao. This is how it looks in our most recent distributions there. But again, something like tarps and tents, they are huge, huge game changers to these families. This is Fan. She's a new arrival. She just came through this summer. She is 30 years old. She's from Nigeria. She's a mother with 8 children under her care. When she had to flee Nigeria, it was the second time her and her family were displaced. The first time her husband lost his leg, and the second time, among the last words that she's heard him say was to go to Minawao. Now, I've shared this story about Minawao not fan story, but I've shared Minnow out 200-300 times, but it never hit me that it would be a loved one's last known words to a wife and her kids. This would be a destination, this place that Rotary and ShelterBox has a presence in the world, a place that we're providing some of the basic necessities, and now giving the ability for Fan, and what a beautiful smile, for Fan and her children to isolate and stay away from one another as best they can in these situations. Real quick, because I don't want to run too late, in Syria, most of our work's in Idlib, which is the northwest corner. We also do some work in the eastern part of the country. Syria, unlike Lake Chad, Syria is in our news. We hear about it every so often still. No peace is breaking out, that's for sure. It's business as usual, bombs dropping, people dying, and mass displacements. This calendar year, 1 million people have been displaced within the country of Syria. That's 1 million people that have probably already been displaced over the last 8 years, numerous times. We found a great need for soap and wash basins, both in Lake Chad Basin and in Syria. So we're providing those in our aid packages there now. Like I mentioned earlier, there's no Rotary in Syria. ShelterBox is the only presence that I know of where you'll see items with Rotary emblems on them that are coming into Syria. There may be others, but I have yet to really hear of any, at least not something that's been so ongoing. Social distancing here in Syria, this is a real recent picture. I love the boys. They show me some very important signs. One, you've got a kid eating something. We don't do food, but we partner alongside, especially in areas like this, where you have to put a lot of different things together because the window of opportunity to get into a country can be very, very short. But a kid eating, a kid checking out our solar light, he's the one in the blue. The kid in the red's just kind of hanging out. But the kid with the box on his head, that's the Brad Howard of that group. That's the Bill Tobin of that group. We express our joy by goofing off. And I know, Brad, I know you're like me in that. And he's goofing off there. And these kids know nothing but war. They've known nothing but war. And through your help, we're bringing a little levity and certainly a lot of comfort to these families. You'll notice in Syria, there's no green box. That was once, we wouldn't ship anything unless it was in the box, but we learned to adapt. The families will need the aid items much more so independently at times than all coming in a box. So we've really adapted our aid packages globally that way. Finally, I want to introduce the just about this time last year, maybe a little, oh no, it's about this time last year, we found she was 8 months pregnant. She had nothing but the tattered remains of a tent that she was probably, I don't know, well, let's just say many families probably inhabited it before she did. Everything you see in this picture was provided through our winter aid package. We do this in Syria now for 3 winters. Includes that 4-inch mattress you see them all sitting on, extra blankets, even those toddler blankets for those babies that were born after she got all this. And also we do things in Syria like coats, hats, gloves, scarves for kids. Last year, there were 36 documented cases of children freezing to death in Syria last winter. And if it's documented, you know there's far many more that went unknown, undocumented. So again, it's not something that you typically see in our boxes, but it is something we found is desperately needed. We found a way to help fill that gap. So thank you so much. Uptown Rotary, you guys gotta have like a song. I love Oakland. It's always been one of my homes. I grew up in El Sobrante, went to high school in El Cerrito, used to work at the Cal football games for many years. And I've seen Tower of Power more times than I could count. So if that doesn't make me an honorary Oakland person, then I don't know what does.
I think it does. We kind of have a song. Brad kind of like pushes it every now and then. It's the Bruno Mars. Oh
yeah.
That's kind of our like theme song in a way, but we can't use that because copyright.
You could do your own version. You might.
Who's gonna come after us?
Yeah.
Right, it came after us, that's true. Well, thank you, Bill. I had a question that Sue had, and then I'll open it up for questions. What does it cost to sponsor one ShelterBox?
Well, that's a good question, because historically it was $1,000 for the box, because we put all the stuff in a box and that was like the one and only item we had. But as I kind of led to throughout the presentation, we really, now that we pre-position aid around the world, we have the shelter kit, we're able to just deliver exactly what's needed. So we can help up to 10 families per $1,000, but a ballpark average, I would say 2 to 3 families is what we would help per $1,000 now, given all the averages. You know, it's like polio drops, it's 60 cents, but it's never exactly 60 cents. That's just kind of the average over the time and the people you help. So for us, it was once 1 family per $1,000. Now I'd say it's more than 1 family per $1,000.
Cool. Anybody else?
And we take, you know, even $1. You know, it's not like you have to wait and do a $1,000 increment. That's for sure.
How do you decide where you're going to go? Or I mean, do you need to be invited, or do you just, there's an earthquake somewhere and then your attention turns there and that's where you go next? Or how do you make those choices?
That's a great question, Jolene. The decision to deploy. We do an entire breakout session, which parallels project planning for a Rotary Club. It's really pretty cool. Yes, first and foremost, you have to be invited. There has to be an international call for aid. So even if it's in the United States, although Hurricane Harvey didn't have an international call, we kind of worked around our rule there, but that was just happened because we had some stock locally. Had we not had that stock, we would have never done that deployment. But that being said, decision to deploy involves the ability to self-recover, how many families are involved, how long will they need to be sheltered with what we could provide. Do we have the capacity to help? That's often our limiting factor. People think because they see us at Pets or they see us, you know, through Rotary that we're much bigger. They think, oh, they got 1.2 million people at their disposal. That's not the truth, as we all know. So we're a lot smaller than people think we are. So then there's times where you just have to be, you just have to really look at and analyze it. Hurricane Dorian last year hit the Bahamas, did massive destruction there. At the same time, there was a horrific monsoon season in Bangladesh. We looked and we actually sent teams to do assessments in both areas. There were over 80 international aid agencies responding to the Bahamas. That's huge considering the population of the country. There were less than 30 responding in Bangladesh. That's a huge disparity of just general aid going that way. We did further analysis and looked and found that Samaritan's Purse, it's a faith-based nonprofit, they're global, they do wonderful work. They'd already had en route 10,000 tarps. Well, that's almost like 1 tarp for every 3 families that are permanent residents there. I mean, it was a huge percentage of aid. What we could deliver there was not going to have a significant impact. We could do it for the numbers, but we don't do anything for the numbers. Meanwhile, in Bangladesh, we partnered with the Bangladesh Red Cross with Rotary. I think we helped the neighborhood of 2,000 to 3,000 families. So what happens on my side as the Rotary Relations person is we were receiving checks every day for Dorian, for the Bahamas, you know, and because we don't do disaster specific funding to begin with very few exceptions, I would have to call those clubs anyways, but to call them and tell them we're not even going, and then to tell them why, well, let's just say that we were fortunate to save over half the money donated and totally understood as a Rotarian, I totally understood a club that said, no, we want to help the people in the Bahamas. You know, and every time a disaster strikes in the US, we always get these groups that just think we're responding. You know, here's $1,000 for this or that. And we typically end up returning that money because they wanted to help locally. And they think because it's ShelterBox USA, that means we're always going to be focused on the USA. And the reality is we're just a global affiliate. Sure, we look at the USA. We look very closely at the USA. We come close several times of responding in the USA in the last 24 months. But the more we look at it, the Durango in the Midwest, the current, real current one, got calls from district governors. We need your tents. Okay, well, the first thing is, how long are you going to get them? Oh, we don't know. Is there any other lodging available? Oh, that was the end of it. There were hundreds of hotel rooms available. People who have insurance, you make a call, State Farm or whoever your insurance agent, they got your hotel covered, especially in disaster situations. So there's a lot of different dynamics that people assume we just go because there's a disaster, but it's much more involved than that. So I know it's a long answer, but I think it's deservedly a long answer.
I have a question for you, Bill. How are you resource constrained? What is your limitation as an organization?
Well, currently, like everything else, it's the ability to respond globally in an efficient time. But generally, our biggest holdup is funding. We don't have globally. Last year, we operated on it, and this is globally, operated on a budget under $20 million. You look at what the Red Cross spends, and I love the Red Cross, don't take this the wrong way, I'm just saying that's that's just a small piece of a pie for them somewhere, especially here locally.
So who was the woman who spoke at or came to the pets that happened in March? What was the woman's name?
That's Carrie Murray. She's a Rotarian, the Montecito Club down in the Santa Barbara area. She's the president of ShelterBox USA.
Mm-hmm.
So she's my boss's boss.
So I spoke to her about an idea that I have tried repeatedly to get to ShelterBox. I'm completely hip to the notion that ShelterBox is not in to rescue folks in the US for the reasons you've cited. But if you are resource constrained with cash or with funds, if ShelterBox would sell their box in places in the United States that have needs, and we know it's coming to the West Coast, we know it's already here because of the fires, we know that at one point there's going to be an earthquake, we know down south that those boxes are going to be a little different because of the needs there, and allow us to pay market rates for a box that could solve all of our ills come the earthquake, you could raise money off our backs further. Rotary clubs would put together fundraisers to sell those boxes in their communities to generate funds for ShelterBox. And I've talked to folks at conventions for the past couple of years. I've dropped my card and said, I'd love to make a proposal for you and give you a better fleshed out idea of this. And I have yet to get someone to call me back and say, we're completely not interested, or, that's an opportunity we hadn't considered. Have you heard any dialogue? I doubt it's come out of any of the requests I've made, but have anything come as a result of that conversation that you know of?
No, not that I know of, but it's not a new concept. Even when I started, in 2010 as a volunteer, that was an idea. It was like, man, if I could buy one of these, I could provide one. You see the folks that like the shoes and socks, those companies that sell shoes and doing
buy one, give one. Yeah.
Well, they're in business to sell shoes. So that is a marketing, I'm not going to say gimmick because it's doing good in the world, but it's a marketing concept for philanthropy for that company. For us to try and do that separate to what we're doing, it's way above my pay grade, so I can't really give you an answer, Brad, but I know it is discussed. And from what I get in general terms is it would be far too big of an undertaking. It would take too much away from where we need to focus right now. We can't just hire a bunch of people to do it. There's no proof of concept, especially since you can go and buy everything that's in a shelter box.
Right.
In fact, we see it. We see districts around the world that deliver inside their own district what basically looks like a shelter box. They even have Rotary branding on stuff, which I know they don't have permission for, but our Rotary Club doesn't always ask for permission, but Rotary branding on stuff. So that's neither here nor there. But
I I appreciate everything you're saying, but you're right. There would be a proof of concept, so you wouldn't go all in on it. But I think it'd be smart of them, particularly if they're looking for funding. But short of that, where can I meet you in a parking lot to buy one of those? Take it off your hands and just
Put it in the garage.
I feel like I'm
Careful.
buying drugs in the 70s.
Careful what you wish for. Jim Carrier doesn't live very far from you at all, and I know he's dying to unload some of his stuff on some new volunteer. We'll call you a new volunteer and get you a tent and a whole box for you, Brad. You just make the donation, we'll call you a volunteer. But we do, I mean, this is Illuminate solar light, and it's pretty much my lighting here tonight. There's one that's lit, that's doing, I like to be as, other than my computer screen, I'm all solar here. And we do, because they're a company in the US, actually 2 girls started them. They were on Shark Tank. If you ever see Shark Tank, they made a deal with Mark Cuban. The following year, Where Are They Now? They were on one of our deployments in Malawi, and you see, rotary wheel and the whole, it's really, really cool if you're a Rotarian. But we do this, and it's exactly what you're saying. You buy these at wholesale, you sell half of them at retail, that pays for them all. That money goes back to Illuminate, and that difference, all of it, comes back to ShelterBox. So it's close. Now, we could do the same thing with Van Gogh, our tent manufacturer, Thirst Aid, our water filter manufacturer, so forth and so on. That concept could come together, but what are they saying? It's deconstructed. You get the right recipe, but I could offer you some of it deconstructed here. And this is actually a real popular fundraiser, to be honest with you.
I would imagine.
Well, anyway, thank you.
Especially with PG&E outages. I don't know if you get them, but we sure do.
Well, you need to include generators in that.
There you go. There you go.
Do anyone else have any other questions for Bill? Want to do it, Will? Everybody? Okay. My last question is, what does it entail for a volunteer? Like, what kind of work do you need to do, or what does that look like to be a ShelterBox volunteer?
Well, there's several opportunities. One we call a club champion, and that's just, you'll just keep up to date with what we do. You'll share Facebook stuff. You'll be that kind of that sort of advocate. I don't know, advocate could take a political term or tone, but we don't mean it in that at all. An ambassador is like another foot in the pool there, where you start doing the presentations. It's a great group. They meet every month online. Wonderful discussion back and forth, always up on top of what we're doing. So it's really important to share that stuff. I mean, it's a Rotary Club success story. It really is. And whether a club donates or not, sharing the message gets it out, and that's important. Now, if you want to be on the response team, that takes about a year, several hours per month. I'm talking probably close to 20. Plus, there is some in-person stuff, so temporarily we aren't putting people through it, but once we're able to, there's a couple in-person things, and then you're able to go do the response work. It's not for everybody. It's not like going on one of Brad's trips, which I have yet to do, but it's certainly on my bucket list, where you go do some service and then you have a wonderful vacation. Hey, I love it. Talk about proof of concept. You knocked it out of the park, buddy. But in a disaster area, what are you going to tour? It's a little bit different scenario. And people aren't necessarily pleased to see you because they're just in such a state of shock.
Right.
So it's quite a different dynamic. Although if we could ever incorporate a Howard's Tours, we'd certainly do that. I think combined, and then they get a ShelterBox to take home with them at the end.
There you go.
A nice relaxing trip to Syria.
Yeah, you only wait 90 days at the border. That's on a good month.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for your presentation. To show our thanks, we are donating vaccines in your name to for polio. So, and you're a Rotarian for those of you watching online.
I'm a past Polio Plus chair in my district, so thank you very much for that. I know those are saving lives.
Yeah, we're dedicated to ending polio now, and recently Africa was named polio free, so we're this close. And we're grateful that you took the time to present to us. I know I reached out to you after the Avenues of Service, and I saw your offer to present on the chat. So I was like, yes, I'm going to get that done. But
thank
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Bill.
you. Thank you, everyone.
Nothing.